Hi everyone, welcome again in a new video of Ignite. In this video, we will see how we can use Ignite with the REST APIs. We have this Spring Boot based application wherein we have a couple of APIs such as get employee or create employee, and we need to get this data from the cache. So for that, we have defined one employee service. This service has employee repository. If you have already worked with the Spring Boot based application with database, then you might have already seen this structure. So this employee repository is the JPA repository when it comes to the database. But now we have to use it with the Ignite. Then instead of the JPA repository, we can create this employee repository as the Ignite repository. With the JPA repository, we have the JPA repository mapped with the entity class. And now here, this is not an entity class. And we need to have the mapping with the cache. If we have a cache named as employee cache on the server, then we need to map the employee cache with our repository. All the method that we define within here will get the data or create the data on that particular cache. For adding this cache, we have added a repository config. To have this Ignite repository, we need one library which is Ignite Spring Data 2.2 ext. Also, this employee repository make use of CRUD repository which is coming from the Spring Framework data repository, and for that we have added the Spring Data Commons library because it's a Ignite based application. So we have Ignite core, and for the Spring Boot we have Spring Boot started web. We have started our server. Within the server, we have defined one employee cache. This is the same configuration as we have seen in our previous videos. So we will not go into detail right now. If we just run our client application, this is failing, and here it says name clash. The delete all by ID method in the CRUD repository, and this delete all by ID method is also there in the Ignite repository. Ignite repository is extending the CRUD repository, and both of them have the delete all by ID method. Ignite repository does not override the method. Because of this, we have the name clash. This bug will be fixed in latest version of Spring Data 22, but right now we don't have this bug fixed. To ensure that there is no clash, we need to use the earlier version of CRUD repository, that is the Spring Data Commons. And for the Spring Data Commons here, we can use the earlier version, which is 2.2.3 release. And with this version, we would not have this name clash because this particular version does not have the delete all by ID method. Now, if we run again, still our application failing, and here it says field employee repository in employee service requires a bean of type employee repository, and this could not be found. In order to find out the repository, we just need to enable the Ignite repository here, and with that, let's rerun the application. I'm showing you all of these issues that you might encounter in your application. So here we have got one more issue, and that says no beans were found that provide connection configuration to Ignite cluster. So it requires Ignite instance, Ignite CFG, Ignite Spring CFG path. In our repository, we have used the repository config, and this requires a bean of following types. So we need to have a bean with Ignite instance name of type Ignite or Ignite client, or we might need a bean which is of type Ignite configuration or client configuration, and the name should be Ignite CFG. Now, if we provide one of the bean in our class path, then this problem will be resolved. And we have already seen in our previous videos, if we need to instantiate the Ignite configuration, how to add the bean. The same way we will add our bean here in the Ignite config, and we have already defined one bean. Let's talk about this. This bean is returning the Ignite configuration, and here we have just applied the client mode as true, and then we have the logger added. If we run this, now again this is failing, and still it has the same issue. For that, whenever we need to define our Ignite configuration, the name has to be Ignite config. This is what we can do by providing the method name. Or we can also define the name of the bean here. We can define the name like this, but right now we will just make use of the method name, and let's run the application. This has been started. Our application is running and it has started the application on port 8080. And let's see what can we do here. So we have two APIs. For the create employee, we have a couple of attributes that we need to pass in our body. Let's create one employee by ID3, name BP3, and this email. We have got the employee created, and this is what we have in the save method that we are calling. When we use the JPA repository, the save method takes only one input, but with Ignite repositories save method takes two input. First one is the key and another one is the value. And now we need to get the employee based on the ID3, but it is failing and there is some internal server error. Let's look at the errors. We need one module Ignite indexing over here, and this has to be in all the nodes, be it server or the client. On our client, if we add this Ignite indexing, rerun the client application. Again, if we call this get method, it is failing. And this time the failure region is failed to find SQL table for type employee with root cause. With this employee repository, we have the employee type, and now our application is not able to find the SQL table for type employee. On the client side, we have not defined any configuration for the cache. This cache has been created on the server. Let's look at the server configuration. On the server, we have the config, ignite config, and here we have defined the cache configuration as employee cache. Okay, so this employee cache has been created on the server. From the client application, we are trying to access the SQL table employee. In order to have this configuration, we need to define our index types, and this type is the key and the value type. If we define this index type, then whenever client will try to access the data from the server, it will be able to access that based on the query. So I'm just starting the Ignite server, and I have deleted the Ignite folder because we want to have a new configuration. Server application has been started, and let's rerun the client application. Let's look at the APIs now. So here we have the get employee, and let's see why it is taking so much time. It is trying to make connection with the server application, and on the server we have got the error failed to process selector key. Okay, and invalid message type -33. Right now on the server side we have added the index type, and whenever a client is trying to call the Ignite server, it is calling the SQL script. On the client side, we have added this Ignite indexing library. Same library we need to add on the server as well. And with this library, if we start the server and then the client, and if we create the employee, let's get the employee, and now we are able to access this. Similarly, if we just access any other employee which does not exist, so it will give us no content. Let's quickly summarize. On the server side, we need the Ignite indexing, and we also need to set the index type on the cache. And similarly, on the client side, we need a couple of libraries, which is Ignite indexing, Spring Data Commons with specific version of Spring Data Common. And then we need to define the Ignite configuration with the Ignite config name. And here our application also need to have the Ignite repositories, and in our repository we need to have the repository config with the same name as our cache name. For the value type, we need to define the query SQL fields for all the fields that we want to be part of SQL. And if certain fields are index real, then we just need to define the index as true. With this configuration, we will be able to access the data from the Ignite cache by applying these SQL queries. This is all about this video. In the next video, we will see other features of Ignite. Till then, happy coding and keep learning.